How you doing? Welcome to another video. Today's video, we're going to talk about endurance, enduring something. If it's endurable, endure it. From the perspective of perseverance, mental perseverance, persisting at something and pushing through discomfort in order to get where you want to go. If you don't know me, I'm Kevin O'Hara. I stopped drinking alcohol back in 2013, and I'm a full-time coach over at habitsfeed2.com, helping other people to stop drinking as well. Okay, this is from a quote from Marcus Aurelius, and he says, if it's endurable, then endure it and stop complaining. And this is one of my favorite quotes from this guy. And I never knew this until I read the book, Meditations, his book, or the book that was put together from his writings. You know, he's an emperor, as you know. And these writings that he had written over the years, you know, the diaries and scrolls and whatever way he was writing them, they weren't meant for public consumption. They weren't meant to be published. They were written for himself, aimed at himself. So when he's saying, endure it and stop complaining, he's talking to himself. And I just think that that's, you know, for me, it's one of the measures of the man. It's a measure of the book itself. And, you know, so if you haven't read this book, go and read it. There's a lot of good advice in it. It's old-fashioned, but there's a lot of good advice in it. Stick with it and, you know, think about what he's saying. You know, for me, building endurance is a virtue if you're using that endurance towards a bigger purpose. If you've got a goal that you want to aim towards, and that's where you're enduring towards. There's no point in doing anything if you're, you know, if you're chasing after a ragged dog. You know, if you haven't got something good that you're aiming towards, if you haven't got a purpose, then what's the point? So long as you've got something that is bringing you upwards. This is all for people who are trying to really motivate themselves and try to, you know, live the best possible versions of themselves. And I think it's a big idea within the Stoical circles. You know, it's a call to clear your mind of all emotional baggage, all the turbulence of your emotions that can happen if you're, you know, especially when you're in the heat of the moment, to try and keep as focused as you possibly can, to be rational in your thinking and be purposeful in your actions. We live in Spain at the moment. We've been back down here for about 3 months. But before that, we were up in Arencel in Andorra, which is a little country between France and Spain. And if you've seen any of my videos from around that area, you know that it's a massive mountainous country. Tiny little place, but it's surrounded by mountains. We're in the Pyrenees. And every year there's this thing called the Sky Run, where, I mean, they get thousands of people coming up there, athletes taking part in this. And they take over the town for the weekend. And it's a 36-kilometer run with, I think it's a total ascent of just over 10,000 feet, right? 3.3 kilometers. I think these people are nuts, right? It wouldn't fit my purpose, you know, going up over these mountains. I mean, there's a lot to run. When you see them going back down, you know they've done it, you know. There's a kids version as well where the kids go up and they're on a slightly different route, obviously. It's a shorter route. I think it's about 10 kilometers, but it's a great thing to get your kids into, that kind of stuff, I think. But I admire the endurance of these people. I admire their tenacity to get into something like that. And for me, it's about discomfort. You know, whenever you're trying to stop drinking alcohol, or, you know, you're trying to get rid of any habit in your life, you're going to have to put up with a certain amount of discomfort. And for me, discomfort is something that you should invite into your life. If you know where it's going, if you know it's going to lead you somewhere positive, right? The second part of his quote there, stop complaining. You know, complaining doesn't make anything any easier. It doesn't make any sense when you're pushing yourself and you know that the discomfort is there. I think it's just a complete waste of time and energy. And I think when you complain, you're putting a negative judgment on things. And any judgment at all, whether it's negative or positive, it changes the suffering. You know, the same with labeling, or your attitude, what attitude you bring out and you push forwards into this thing. So there's pointless versus purposeful. That comes in your attitude. There's, maybe you're calling something terrible versus you're saying it's necessary. And for me, it's one of the givens in life, is that life is going to give you suffering one way or another. And I think if you don't take control of that suffering, if you don't push it towards a goal that you want to get to, if you don't think about and think long and hard and keep revisiting those thoughts about where you want to go to, and even if you're in your the later part of your life, right, I think you're going to visit much more suffering on yourself, and it's going to be a lot tougher to get through. You go through a little bit of suffering, you go through the discomfort, and you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to not only to deal with it physically and mentally, but how to respond to the suffering when you know it's there. You kind of start welcoming the suffering. Like I said, if you know that it's leading to a good place. Viktor Frankl talks about this. If you haven't read it, there's another book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I think he talks about the choices. When you get a choice to make, it's not only the situations that you're in, even if you're in the direst of circumstances, you still get a choice of how you respond, how you react to those things. And I don't think people generally want to suffer, right? I think people want to put it off. But suffering is just a part of who we are, like I've said. And we live in a society, especially in the West, where from the top of our society to the bottom, we're looking for instant gratification. Even from the politicians. The politicians are working on a 2 to 4 year cycle, and that's all they care about, right? There's not very many politicians who care about how things are going to be in 10 or 20 years, let alone in 100 years. It was one of those things that I remember hearing after the Americans pulled out of Afghanistan. And one of the Taliban leaders says, we're going to win this in the long run because you people think in terms of election cycles for 8 years. We think in terms of centuries. So, when you've got people like that around, it makes it very difficult if you're not thinking along those lines. And it's the same with society when you get down to the individuals. There's a lot of people in life who just want it easy now, and they're not interested in the hard. They want to push the hard down to tomorrow. And they look at suffering like it's a bad thing. And, I really think that suffering is one of those things that will teach you so much about yourself. It teaches you much more about yourself than pleasure will, that's for sure. And there's an end to this quote as well, an end to the statement. I'll read it to get it right. He says, "But if it's unendurable, then stop complaining too. Your destruction will mean its end as well. In either case, let your mind be clear. There is no evil in enduring." So, how many possible outcomes do we have in our life which is going to end in death, or end in serious injury? Most of the stuff that we're most of the suffering that we're trying to endure is merely discomfort. It's just, we try to put that off as much as possible. I think the point of this is that there's no point in pointless complaining, right? These things never change things for the better. I think they only change things for the worst. So it's a good rule to have. Don't explain, don't complain. I'll leave it there for today. All right, take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Onwards and upwards. Bye now.